podcast. I can never remember how I get the link to my, there we go, it's down here. So I'm going to post that in the Slack channel right now. Yeah. So today, like I said, pretty casual. We're going to be going over just some basic stuff. First thing is introductions. I'll introduce myself, and then after talking about a little bit of stuff, we'll sort of take a break, and I'll have you guys introduce yourselves. Maybe just get a little conversation or engagement going, and I'll probably need to do that for the first several classes because I am pretty epically bad with names. I'm not going to lie. There are people I literally had lunch with every day for a year and a half in high school who I never knew the name of. So we're talking really bad. So my apologies if I struggle with them for a while, but I will really work at it. If you have any questions and you want to send them to me in email as opposed to Slack for whatever reason, my email is just going to be my last name @gmail.com. It's a little weird. Yes, there are 2 I's there right after the S. So a little strange. The Slack channel is slack.com and then the channel we'll have for this class and talking about this class will just be JS-Basics. So if you haven't got the email invite for Slack, I don't know what email address you've been using to contact Code to Dream, but send an email and we'll get you added to the Slack group, and then you can join that channel so that you can be part of all the conversations that we have going forward. Has anybody used Slack before? Any bit. It's just another chat tool. Some of the great things about Slack are that it's, let me see, can I make the text bigger? Cool. It'll keep a history of everything, so you don't have to be in there to see the history, and you don't have to follow it all. You can message individual people, and you can even message, like if you post a message, you can post something, but you can even post something to the whole channel to notify people. But if you want to message somebody specifically, you can like at their name to message that person, and it'll go to the channel, but it'll also send a message to that individual. So if they have Slack on their phone, which you can get an app for, or they have notifications enabled, they'll get notified whenever something like that is sent to them. And then there's, funny integration Slack has. So you're bored, one of the popular ones is like Giphy, and this always fails. So this is going to be tragic when it goes wrong, but at least it'll be funny and on video. Oh, I guess I need to actually screen share for that. Let me share my screen instead of people having to see me on this. There we go. But you can do like slash is how you use integrations in Slack. So like /hello, and what it'll do is just get a random GIF off of Giphy that it thinks matches hello in some way. Usually it goes tragically wrong. Sometimes you have to delete them because, oops, it was worse than I thought. But I think you can set them. So I don't know what our settings are on ours, but you can say like only G-rated ones. So you should have fewer of those incidents. Slack also lets you post documents or other things if you want to, and a lot of links that you post, it'll automatically like embed YouTube videos or other things like that. Like you can see, you can click right here to start watching the stream that I posted. So I think the most important thing that I'm going to encourage throughout this whole course is just asking questions, engaging in class, talking and having a back and forth, engaging on Slack, engaging with each other, because the more that you do that, the more you're going to get out of it. Got you stumped, I'll almost guarantee you somebody else is dealing with the same issue. There's a good chance I just communicated something in a way that wasn't clear in a lot of cases. I've been doing this for a very long time, so some things are just sort of natural to me at this point that I might gloss over and forget, oh, I really needed to cover that in more detail, or I didn't explain that in a way that made sense to everybody. And so as long as you're asking those questions and trying to follow up, you're going to get a lot out of the class. If instead you sort of get quiet, or you're afraid to ask a question because you feel like you're going to look silly because it seems like everyone else understood that concept, it's going to be a lot harder for you to really get the material and engage the way that you need to. So normally when I'm up here talking, it's not just me going to be talking out, like put your hands up, ask questions while I'm going, anything that's going through your head. You know, if I don't have an answer right then, or I think it's something for us to come back to, I'll let you know. Otherwise, I'll try and address it at that point in time. So quick overview of the course. This course is going to be focused on the basics of programming. So really, no matter what programming language you work with, they share a common core, common set of basic functionality. It can differ in very specific ways, but the concepts, the ideas, how they end up getting interpreted by the computer, it's all very, very similar between programming languages. And so the most important thing to take away is not the syntax, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while, not the syntax of a specific programming language, but the concepts behind it, the ideas, how those ideas work. And so syntax it's not something that you probably use a lot in your day-to-day language in terms of a word. Syntax just means the way that stuff is constructed. Like English has a syntax. I am going to the store is like the syntax of English, where you're putting your object and your action, and you're sort of building it in a very specific way. And each programming language will have its own syntax as well. And some of them have it where, let me pull up some JavaScript stuff real fast, and then I forget how to do it on my Mac automatically. There we go. Pull up my developer tools. Whew, look at all those errors. It's gonna be hard with Hangouts. Throwing a whole bunch of errors. Let me try it from a different page. Instead, hold on. Dock to the side. I don't want my dev tools open for this site. Let me just go to an empty page. That's better. So syntax, and this is stuff you don't need to know right now, but syntax will be like var foo equals var. This is syntax of the language. Like the var bit here, even the equals is syntax, although it's a very common syntax. And there's a lot of that that's specific to each programming language, but the important aspect in all of it is, once again, getting the ideas behind it, not getting hung up on the syntax. So syntax is critical because, unlike humans, if I'm vague in what I say, if I'm vague with the syntax of English, most people can understand what I'm trying to mean, right? But we've all also had situations where somebody said something and, oh, I misunderstood. I didn't understand exactly what you were saying. I thought you meant this, but you really meant this other thing. But for a computer, they're incapable of dealing with that ambiguity. They can't, you're programming with a language just like English is a language, except their language can't have ambiguity. So you can't say something that it doesn't know exactly what it means. It has to know exactly what you're trying to tell it in order to execute on those actions. And that's where a lot of people get tripped up when they're starting to learn programming is, oh, it's really hard. It's just, I have to get everything perfect. And I know what I'm trying to put down. I understand it in my head, but I got this syntax just a little bit off. And I can't quite get it there. That's going to happen to you all the time. That happens to, I mean, I program in this language every day, and I keep references up on the side of my browser all the time so that I can get the syntax of how to do things. And I make syntax mistakes and get them wrong. Like you might do var foo equals var, and that's not the same thing as what I was trying to do. And it might take you a while to get over those. That's going to be a lot of the hangups that you're going to encounter initially when you're learning how to program, are these syntax issues. And these can actually be some of the most frustrating ones. because once you solve it, it's like one character. Oh, I just forgot to put a space there? Ah, man, I feel so foolish. It's going to happen all the time. Don't worry too much about it. But again, the key is making sure that you understand those concepts, because that way, if you change to another language, you'll still get hung up on the syntax. You're still going to have to learn the syntax of the other programming language and how to code in it. But the concepts transition between languages, and you'll be able to bring that over and sort of know what you're trying to build. And then all you have to worry about at that point is getting your syntax moved over to the other language. Talking about that, one of the things I think best describes sort of the experience you encounter when you're first learning how to program is anyone here familiar with Seth Godin at all? He's sort of a motivational writer or speaker. He talks a lot about just, I don't know, positive aspects of sort of working on yourself. And a very, very short book that he wrote that I think captures the big challenge that you encounter almost when you're learning anything, but I feel like in programming it's almost more so than just succinct in it about anything else. It's called The Dip. And the idea is that when you like first learning something new, you're really picking up stuff rapidly. And that's what's going to happen when you start learning to program in this class. You're going to pick up a lot of material very, very quickly. And you're going to feel like, oh man, I've got it all figured out. I really understand how to code. It all makes sense. And I can go out there and write all of this amazing stuff. And then you're going to suddenly realize that there is a lot more to it than you thought. I've been doing this for a decade, and I know almost nothing about programming compared to the domain that it is. It's one of the largest domains of really any field of study. It's probably, I mean, to be fair, when you think of something like Microsoft Windows or Mac OS or even Android or something like that, the complexity of that code and everything that goes into that is probably one of the most complex things that people have ever built. So anyone would be able to understand all of that, or that it's going to be an easy field to pick up everything in and just power right through. That's not going to happen. But as you learn how to program, you'll have many, many times where you sort of go through this curve where you're picking stuff up really rapidly, and then, oh man, I really hit this dip and it seems like it got way more complex and difficult and challenging. And I just don't know if I want to try and keep going at this. I don't know if it's going to get better. But the great thing is, you know, as he shows here, if you push through, it gets much more rewarding. You start seeing those benefits come through a lot more. So for this class in particular, that dip, I would say, I mean, it usually comes about halfway through the course when we start adding in a lot more concepts, when we start piling on some of the more ideas, the complicated foundations of programming. And that's when some people get sort of discouraged, like, oh, it's a challenge, I'm falling behind a little bit. But I encourage you to push through, because you're going to really get rewarded if you can conquer those concepts. And then, hey, you get to tackle a whole nother one if you go on to the next course, where you'll get a whole new set of concepts and ideas, and you move from building really small, tiny programs that do very simple things to trying to build these complex programs that are more like an actual app that somebody works with and interacts with. But again, this is just one of the things, like, I encourage you to push through it a lot, because the reward is massive on the other side when you learn how to code. I mean, everything nowadays is running on software. You know, robots are taking over in many respects, and if you don't know how to build them, how to tell them what to do, you're gonna be challenged in the future in one way or another. Any questions about anything so far? All right. So I think it would be a good time to take a short break, for me talking at least, and then I'm gonna let's do some sort of icebreaker or something. Let's do this. So that it's not just me talking or you talking to me. Let's have each one of you talk to the person next to you or behind you. You know, find somebody and get their name and let's say their favorite like recreational activity. So get their name and recreational activity. Talk to them and find out if somebody doesn't I think we have an odd number. I'm not sure. So if somebody wants somebody else, I'm up here and you can talk to me. And then we'll go around and have each person like give the name of the other person and what they like. How's that sound? All right. Let's give that a go. Groups of 3.
You need to put in the password first, and then it'll prompt you with the password.
So for here, is that what I would put the industry?
Yeah, that's the second. That's the second username and password. That's correct. That's where you put username and password. You got the cross password prompt earlier. That's where you need to put American.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little awkward. Let me think. That's gonna be a common issue. So let's see why.
Take it out. All right. How's everyone doing? Everyone learned something about the person they were chatting with? You ready to be quizzed? Just so I can hear names another time, so I can maybe one of these years actually get them down. All right. I'm going to start up here with the one name that I think I know. Mario?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, just talk about me or about her.
Let's hear about her.
All right, so her name's Laura. And she, she's her recreational activity that she likes to do. She likes to run. And so, I thought that was pretty interesting because I was talking to her about it. And I just recently started going to the gym again. So I found that pretty interesting, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's
great. And it's Laura, right? All right. Laura, something to tell us about Mario?
This is Mario. Mario
Plays soccer. That requires a lot of running. I run a little bit, and then I played soccer one time, and I couldn't keep up with those guys. All right. Well, let's move back.
Okay. This is William.
All right.
And William likes to talk about video games with programming, how we got started into it. And then I'll show you the version. It's pretty awesome.
Awesome. That's really cool. What are you using for that?
It's basically an engine called Fusion. It's like this fine game engine where you just basically just do pretty much anything.
Really cool. Awesome, William. And how about Casey?
And she likes to do photography.
Cool. Very cool. Let's move on back.
So, her name is Alejandra.
All right.
Alice, very English. She likes to dance, music.
Oh, to dance. Sweet.
I think it's the first time she's getting to the culture.
Really? Awesome. All right. Alejandra?
His name is Esteban. He's been in the US for about a year. His English isn't that great.
Okay.
He's actually really good.
Yeah.
He likes soccer, and it's his first time coding and stuff like that.
Awesome. All right.
Okay, so I'm Karen, and I kind of already know him, but on his recreational activity, with soccer. Play soccer.
All right. Axel?
Yeah, this Karen. Yeah, we've already known each other for a while, but he likes to read his mind.
All right. Let's move up. I think you two were. All right.
So this is Suma, and she plays soccer.
Play soccer. We got a lot of soccer players here. You guys can build a team.
This is Sandra. It's like tennis.
What was that?
Tennis.
Tennis. Ugh. We're good at that, you know? We had to learn it in middle school, and all I did was hit it over the fence, and I was like, ah! All right. Were you two? Okay.
Her name is Faith. She likes to run. She's
And she's what?
the only child.
Only child. All right.
This is Nara, and she likes to
Likes to read. Sweet. All right.
Oh, this is David. He likes computers.
Like computers. Just playing games, or are you programming?
No, technology in general.
Technology in general? All right.
Playing with tools or sort of tools that
Cool.
the technology that we use now. Program. I like demos.
Oh, yeah.
I had like
5 different distros installed on different machines. But I'm not doing anything, like work related.
Yeah.
Public.
You'd love Ramiro. He's our like head instructor. I think he runs Linux on his laptop still. All right. And
He's John.
Yeah.
Johnny is a graphic designer, computer.
graphic designer.
Yes.
Really cool.
Visual.
Oh, I think.
And he likes it.
It's like
I
seven.
forgot about that.
All right.
Is Nicker his name?
All right.
Nicker. He from Dominican Republic. He like basketball. He like computer. He's very interested about, and he's still in high school. That's it.
Awesome. And
I am Lincoln. He's the people IT, he likes to play soccer. He's the English.
and this is my evidence of just how bad I am. So that's right. And she said she likes to read, so she enjoys reading, particularly fiction.
He's Jerry, you guys know, he likes coding, camping, and playing cards, a card game called Magic with Friends. And he does not do any tournaments.
There you go. Now you know just how nerdy I am. All right. I don't know if people still wanted to break and wanted to walk around or not. Otherwise, we can get into some technical stuff today if you want. Did everybody get the invitation to Cloud9 to join Cloud9 along with Slack? Who signed up so far? All right, good number. You sign up for the Cloud9 or get set up? Sweet. Well, if you haven't, that'll be really the next step for class is setting up your Cloud9 account. And I'm going to walk through sort of what you would want to do because I'm going to set one up here for our class as well so that you guys have a reference and an example of what you're going to want to do. So when you get into your account, you'll want to create a new workspace. And for the workspace type, you can give it whatever name you want. I'll call mine JS Basics and make it public. And then I would suggest that you choose the Node.js template for the template that you create. In our previous classes, we've used the Rails or even the Rails tutorial one. But I suggest Node.js because we're going to be using JavaScript as the primary language. And Node is a way to run JavaScript without having to have a browser available. And then you'll just create your workspace. It's going to take a while to go through the process, setting up the workspace and getting everything ready. One of the great things about using something like Cloud9 for our development, as opposed to trying to have everything set up on each one of your individual computers with a development environment, is we'll all be using the same environment, the same setup. It's something that you guys can share with me. So if you're having a challenge in a problem that you're working on, or you're trying to work through something, you can share your Cloud9 workspace, and I can go ahead and hop in there and take a look at it and see what we can do to get it working, which is a lot nicer than if we're trying to work on just your individual system. And you don't really have to worry about breaking anything because this is just a virtual machine. It boots up this machine in the cloud for you, and if you screw anything up, just create a new workspace. So you don't have to worry. You really get to feel free about experimenting and playing and trying something new that you wouldn't have normally done. Get how to zoom in here. Let me see. All right, let's see if I can make this bigger. I don't know if it's going to work because that is pretty tiny. So when you get into Cloud 9 for the first time, I think they still do this. They're not for this account, but there's a there at least used to be a tutorial that they would walk you through, sort of teaching you about the different portions of Cloud 9 and the different sections of it. Oh yeah, the show guided tour. So I recommend you go through that and familiarize yourself with this environment. It's what we're going to be working and spending a lot of our time in throughout the class. And there's some different areas to it. You've got sort of your workspace, your files. That's where you manage your files that you see at any point in time. You can navigate around to different areas and files. If anyone's familiar with editors like this is sort of a programming style editor. And so something that is pretty common in them is it acts a lot like a browser where you can have multiple tabs with different files open at the same time, as opposed to, say, Word, where you're just working on one file. And that's because a lot of times you're bouncing back and forth when you're coding between multiple files. You're looking at this one, and then you're bouncing back to another file to check and reference it, and you're having to move back and forth really rapidly. So that sort of tabbed experience is very, very common in development environments. We'll talk about the preview and the run a little bit later when we do some of our first apps or some of the first code that we get working. The sharing is, I just mentioned, you can share your environment with me, with the instructor. This is sort of how you'll do that, is you'll grant somebody else access. In this case, I believe it's a CTD instructor that you would grant access to, and then I could log in and check it out and see what's going on in your workspace at any point in time. You can also choose just collaborate with other people, so give other people access in different ways. And we'll get into the outlining and the debugging more as well as we go through. So any questions about that yet? All right, if not, I wish this would zoom. Let me see if there's a way I can make it larger. I don't think so. There we go. Maybe that'll work. No, it's up there. It won't do it down here. Nope. All right. Yeah, we'll have to work with it this way because I forget how to magnify properly on my Mac. It's not, yeah, it doesn't zoom in on this. Nope. I have to use the Mac like magnifier or whatever, and I cannot remember for the life of me what that is on. I think it's a magnifying glass on here, but it might be. Nope. Maybe you'll let me do it over here. Well, that worked. All right. So then for the rest of today, we're pretty much going to be talking about the terminal and how to interact on a terminal. Who here has worked with a terminal interface before or typed at a terminal? Most of you are, I'm sure, familiar with the GUI interface, but has anybody worked with a terminal somewhere or another? Yeah, not a surprise. All right. So most of us are very, very familiar with GUIs, this sort of interface with windows and buttons and other ways to interact with an application. But before GUIs were commonplace, yes, graphical user interface, yeah. So it just means that there's a lot of graphical elements to it. Before that was commonplace, there was what was known as the console or terminal, or on Windows, it's command. Prompt is what it's called. And this is a way to interact with the computer, and you're still interacting with it very much in the same sort of way that you would be from a graphical user interface. but you're doing it just with the words that you type into the terminal. So it knows certain commands. It knows what those commands do, and then that executes certain things. So an example is, here we are in our workspace, and over here you can see that we've got a JS Basics folder, and inside of that we have a client folder and a node modules and some files. And if we wanted to do that same thing, if we wanted to see what files there are on a Linux terminal, in this case this is Linux or Unix type terminal, it's also the same on a Mac, you type ls. It's sort of short for list. And what you see is, oh, here's this client folder, this node modules folder, and the files. And it just listed those out right there on the command line. And that's the way that you're going to interact when you're interacting in a terminal. So you're going to need to, not everything that we do is going to be as terminal based as it has been in, say, the Ruby courses that we've offered, because Ruby is really driven from the terminal very, very heavily. JavaScript, not necessarily, but you're going to want to get comfortable enough with it that you understand what you're doing, especially as you're working on projects, creating files, and making changes like that. So there's a certain subset of commands that I'd say are the most essential for you to get used to. ls is probably one of the first ones. It's just list. It tells you, oh, here's the files. And there's, on all of these, or almost every command, there's different options that you can give to them to do different things. So you could do like ls-l, and that stands for long. And you can see it's the same list, but it's got a lot more detail in here about them. And then if I did like -l-h, it stands for long, and then the H stands for like human readable, which it's a little more subtle what that changed, but what you see is this line right here, this column, was the size of the file. And now instead of being 4096, it says 4K, so 4 kilobytes. So it gives you some extra options there. And you're not going to need to memorize all of those for any of these, but one thing that you will want to know is the man command, which is probably the most important one to know. It's short for manual, so if you're ever to help remember that, man, and then whatever command you're trying to get information about, so in this case, ls. What that's going to do is open up the manual for this ls command. You can also Google these, man ls, and you'll get a lot of information about it on Google, or just Linux ls. But this will give you right there in your terminal information about ls. Oh, ls is list directory contents. And to help you read this out, I'm going to probably want to bring a laser pointer for my classes at some point. Oh wait, is this one? It is, but it's very dim. All right, to help you understand how to read this, and this will be the same for pretty much every command. You'll see the synopsis section. It's like the command, here's options, and then things that other types of options, other things you can do. And it'll give you a description, and then here are these dash things. These are all of the options that you can have. So you see that for like ls, for example, there are a lot of options, and they do a lot of different things. If you have questions about a command, what are the different options, feel free to dig into them. Yes?
How did you get to that page right
How did I get to this? Or how did I move down?
How did you get to that?
This was man space, and then ls. It stands for manual, and then most of the major commands will have a manual page describing them. And then it is a little weird when you get in here, navigating around. The most common way you navigate is using space to go down a page and Q to exit the manual. Sort of Q is quit. If you're in the man pages or something, you can walk down through it, looking at the information page by page. U is how you go up. I think page up and page down work too, or even the arrow keys, if you prefer that. So the arrow keys go up one at a time. And then a lot of them will even give you some examples of how to issue the commands. But man, definitely probably the most important one, because if you have any questions about a command, I encourage you to do that anytime. The other probably two most important ones when you're really just starting out are this CD command and PWD. So CD stands for change directory. So I'm going to clear my screen real fast to move it to the top. That's another command. If just clears all of the output in the terminal at that point in time. We can do man CD. We've got a problem. We don't have a manual entry for it. One of the reasons we don't have one for CD is it's sort of built right into the operating system, so it's not a separate program. Most of these commands that you're running, like ls, that's actually a small little program that reads some information out and then prints it to the screen. CD is built into this terminal itself, so we don't have a manual page for it. And there's a few of those that you'll encounter, but not a lot. CD, though, just stands for change directory. And the way it works is, if you were in the graphical user interface, you change the directory by clicking on your other directory that you want to go into. But in the terminal, you have to know where you're at and know where you're trying to go to change directories. So right now we're in this, looks like this workspace is what it calls it here. It calls it JS Basics over here, but the workspace folder, and we can see that there's a client folder inside of there. So if you type CD client, it will move us into the client folder now, and you'll see right here, this is just a nice thing that the Cloud9 terminal gives you. It's sort of an indication of where you're at and what folder you're in. The little squiggly mark means home, so it's home, workspace, client. So now if we did ls, it's going to list the files not in the folder we were in before, but the files inside of this client folder and folders inside of that client folder. So then it's sort of that same command anywhere you want to go. So now we can go into the JavaScript folder, this JS one inside of there, and see that we've got some extra files. But all right, now we want to get back down to our workspace level. The command for that to move down a directory is ... with CD, so it's CD space ... and that moves down one directory. So you see that we got out of the JavaScript or the JS folder and we're in client again. And then ... can move down. And these are things that you'll pick up pretty quickly the more you work in the console.
Are all you guys, is everybody who has a laptop, are you all in the?
Yeah, I tried.
You tried? Is this working?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Is everybody who's was able to get in Cloud9 in it? Because if you're not in Cloud9, yeah, if for any reason you're having trouble with Cloud9, you should also be able to, Jared, can you tell them the easiest way if you're on a PC or a Mac to get?
On a PC, it'll work a little differently. Most of the commands are the same, but on a PC, the easiest thing is to hit the Windows button and type command prompt, and it'll give you the application, the command prompt, and you can open that. That's similar, but a lot of the commands are a little different inside of the Windows command prompt from the Linux ones that you encounter in Cloud9. On a Mac, I believe the application is called Terminal. So I use Spotlight to launch my apps. So just find the Terminal app. Like I use Spotlight, so it's command space and then Terminal, and that will open up a terminal window. And this terminal window really is the same type of thing as what we were just looking at.
If you have a PC, and well, actually, whichever type of computer you have, I actually think it's kind of helpful for understanding what you're doing to play with it on your actual computer in addition to on Cloud9, just because you get more of a sense of like how you're moving through things. Like rather than seeing like workspace, you'll see like desktop. Oh, I'm on my desktop right now. And when you're at your desktop level, when you type ls, you'll see, I mean, if you have files on your desktop, you'll see all those files, and then you can choose to cd, change directory, into any one of those. And it's the same, you'll see that you're basically able to do everything that you could do like in Windows or on a Mac just by moving your mouse. You can do it from the terminal or on a PC as well. There are, like Jared said, there are some differences in the commands on a PC. But if you just Google, it's really easy to find. As you guys will hear this all the time, I mean, half of programming is Googling. So you just Google and find a good resource. One of the first things that comes up will probably give you a nice list of all the commands. Right. What should they Google for a PC?
Probably command prompts, commands, or something like that, or DOS commands. So I can create a reference here for some of these, right? So for CD, it's the same on both, except for when you're navigating directories, it's both CD on each of them, except the directory divider is opposite. So on a Mac or Linux, like the Cloud 9 space, if you're navigating directories, let's say we're going to go down to, so it'd be like .. .. and on the PC it's .. / the other direction. So I can never remember which one's which. This is \, I think, so /. For listing the files, that one is different. ls is the command on Mac and Linux, and on a PC it's dir. So it's like directory. And then as we go through a few more of these, I can list some of the differences between them. But I mean, I agree. It's definitely easier to see what's going on when you're on your own system. So like if you're looking at, this is my system, and you can see, oh, there's a lot more going on in here. Look at all these files. Normally on, yes. How do you clear? Oh yeah, clear is another one that's different. So on Mac and Linux, it's clear. This is one that's weird to me, and I'll tell you why in a second, just for me. On a PC, it's CLS. I find it weird because most commands are like the shortened version on Linux. So you get these very terse things like ls, and you get the more verbose ones like dir on a PC. And then this one is reversed. Clear is longer on a Mac, but it's like this CLS command or whatever on a PC. And if I script the PC commands, someone can check and confirm and let me know, but I'm pretty sure that one's right.
Yeah, and as Jared said, that like if you just Google, command prompt commands, that'll pull up all the PC ones for everybody who's on a PC. Like basically, there's tons of different sites. There's actually a whole website called commandwindows.com and you can just see all the different,
right.
Just a whole list of all the different commands. Although you actually have to, actually there's these little like tutorials. You can also, as with most of the stuff we do in class, you can always also like go on YouTube or something and find like, just Google or go on YouTube and do introduction to the command line or introduction to terminal. And unlike class, there's no guarantee that it will be good, but if you try a couple of them, you'll find something helpful.
Are you giving that guarantee for class?
Yes, I'm guaranteeing, Jay.
That's scary. Yeah, I'll actually include a reference for both a PC and Linux or whatever for basic commands in the links for today's class. So I'll post that into Slack sometime after class, probably tomorrow is more likely. Let's take a look at what's my next. I can't find my page. All right, there we go. That's what I want. All right, so PWD, that was the other one I I was suggesting you look at here. So let's go to my actual system and we'll look at that. PWD, what does this do? All that's telling me is what's your present working directory. That's sort of what it means. So return the working directory. It's not as critical on, say, Cloud9 because it sort of shows you your directory in front of your path right here, like this workspace bit. But if you're ever like, where am I? I don't understand where this is on the system. I don't understand where this is in my file path. PWD is the way to sort of learn that and use that information moving forward. You'll see there's not a lot of options. There's not a lot to this one because it's a pretty basic command. There's not a lot that you can configure or do different than just list what I'm at. All right, so we've listed the files and we've navigated up and down a little bit. Now let's say we want to add a new file from the command line. We want to create a file. There's a lot of different ways you can do this, but one of the most common ways to create a file, just an empty file of some kind, is just called touch. I don't know if it's the same on Windows, so that's, I'm not certain. But touch will create a file and you just give it the file name. So let's say we want to create hello.txt. You can see it popped in over on my left side there in the folder that I'm in. So it created this file hello.txt. Now, we might want to actually see what the content of that file is in our command prompt as well. All right, we've got a file, but how can I see what's in it? There's a lot of different ways to do that. One of them is just cat, and it stands for concatenate. And what we see is, okay, nothing showed up. But probably the more popular ones when you're working, just looking at a file on the command prompt, are things like less. And this will work a little differently because instead of just spitting it out, less opens up basically another application that lets you view your file. So in this case, oh look, there's nothing. So let's look at one that actually probably has some code. Let's do, what? I hit Q. Q is the, if you're stuck on anything, and we'll get to that in a little more, but Q is probably one of the most common ways to exit. But there are other ways to do it, and we'll cover like, oh crap, in a minute.
And just want to clarify for all you guys, once you, even though most of you have PCs, once everyone is set up with Cloud9, it won't matter. You'll all be using this system on Cloud9, which just happens to be more similar to the way that Macs work.
Right.
It's not that one is necessarily better than the other, but so once you're all on Cloud9 though, you'll all be using the same.
I don't have it. What's your name? Esteban. All right. Yes.
I think there is another way to clear screens using a shortcut.
Oh yeah, there are some other ways to do it.
You want to learn that?
It depends. That's very platform specific, so I don't usually cover like.
I use Command K.
What?
Command K.
Comment, yeah. I don't do it very often because they're very specific, and the other reason I also don't do it when I'm doing instruction is because you can't see it. So it's one that, like the cue, you know, if you don't see the action, it's very hard to know what's going on. But yeah, it's faster, it's easier. And there's a lot of shortcuts to this stuff. Another really useful thing to know is that in most environments, Windows doesn't do it quite as well, but in most of them, the arrow keys, the direction keys up and down, hitting up will show your last command that you entered. So if you screwed something up, you know, like here's a great example. I typed car server.js instead of cat. It tells me, yeah, there's not a command found there. I'm like, oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, okay. I can just go back up in here and change it and run it. Or if you need to rerun it because you had to exit out, but you want to run that same command again, you can hit the arrow key to go back up through your command history to some extent. It's not as supported on the console and Windows, but it does exist. So this is what cat does. You can see here's all of the contents of this file, and it just spit it right out to the terminal console. So you can read it all at the console, but it's all just written out directly. In this case, it's a relatively small file, so it's not too bad, but you can imagine how it would be harder with a larger file. So that's where a program like less comes in if you're looking at something on the terminal, because less, again, the arrow keys or space let you navigate up and down through the file bit by bit and look at whatever portion you want to look at. And then the Q button will let you exit. So less is very popular. There's also, because this is the way that Unix people's humor is, and I don't know if it's on here, we'll see. There's also more. It does pretty much the exact same thing. So if you prefer more or less, take your choice. All right, let me keep walking through here. So we created the file. We've read files using cat and less. We didn't actually put any content into the file, and you can, but this is getting into more advanced stuff that you're probably not going to do from the command line, right into a file. That same cat command that we used to show, say, server.js, you can also use it to write to a file if you want to. Like you can do cat hello. Oh, I did that backwards, I think. It's been a while since I've done that. Maybe you can't with cat. Maybe it's echo. Yeah, it's echo. And then an arrow, and then. So echo just writes something out. So if you want, like if I did echo hello, you see it just shows up right there on my terminal. But it did something a little different with that line before, because this little arrow symbol meant pipe or send into something. So now let's cat, still like a keep typing car, cat hello.txt. I see that it has the text hello in it when it had nothing in there before. And that's because I echoed something and I told it go into this location as opposed to just write out to the console, which is its default. That's not something you're probably ever going to need to do, at least not at first. It's definitely a much more advanced console type functionality. So I'd focus on more of the navigation, basic file creation, work like that. So now we have this file, but we want to delete it. All right, we know how to delete stuff from the graphical user interface. How do we delete it from the console? RM, remove, is the common way to delete something. I think it's, I don't know if RM works on Windows, but I know delete does. So RM supported on a Mac, and I know DEL works on Windows to delete a file. They're very similar. Another difference, by the way, between most of the Mac and Windows command lines is that most of the options that you type when you're in a Mac, like when I did ls-l, or if I did ls-a, for example, to show everything, most of them use a dash or a double dash to say this is an option. On a Windows system, most of them use a backslash to say, here's your command. So it'd be like dir s or dir l/l instead. And I don't think you have the man command to help you know what a command is on Windows. I think help might exist, or at least it did way back in the DOS days. But if not, most commands, to go along with the man, most commands have help as well as one of their options. So most of them you can do like, but you can do -- help. And that gives you a short summary of command as well. So that's another way to get information. But that's the difference is it's not clear what's going on when you're first learning this stuff is man is a program that reads these specific pages that these applications have written. That -- help, that's each individual program. So not all of them have that. Some of them, like CD command doesn't really have any help for you. All right, so we deleted files, we've written files. All right, now WTH. What do we do when we get ourselves in? We're stuck. How do we don't know how to get out. What? That works. That's a good first thing to try in a lot of cases. So let's do like server.js, and let's say we forget. We don't know how to get out of here anymore. C or Command C is one of the first things to try when you're stuck. And then Z is also something else that you can try if that doesn't work. So Control Z is another option. So you notice that was Control Z and it got me out, and it says stopped --r server.js. So this is sort of your escape hatches. You've screwed something up. Let me type node here, and oh no, it's in some weird state and I don't know what to do. How do I get out of this? I did Control Z and it exited me out. So Control C, Control Z, and that's pretty much the exact same on Windows or Mac. Control C, Control Z, if you get stuck in some state and you're not sure how to get out of it. I don't know if Ruby is on this system. There we go. I've gone into another one and I don't know what to do. Control Z got me out of it. What?
Control C.
Control C?
Yeah.
On Windows? Yeah. It varies, and not every application responds to one or the other. Control Z works the vast majority of the time on Linux systems, but sometimes Control C is preferred. So sometimes you just sort of smash both of them. You're like, Control C, Control Z, I don't know how to get out of this. I'm in a stuck state. That's sort of just your escape hatch if you don't know how to get out of something. So you saw it earlier, again with less as an example, less server.js. And if you forget that Q is how you get out of there, Control Z, get out as well. All right, let's see here. Just a few more things to go over. And then we pretty much covered what I wanted to make sure we got through today. Just getting your feet wet and getting started. We've talked about the arrow keys already, and those can get you back to previous commands. That's incredibly useful. Don't forget that, because you don't have to type it out every time. At first, you may not realize how useful it is, but for example, when we start running actual programs, a lot of times you'll run the same thing. Like you'll type node because you're running your program, or you'll even have some extra parameters. Node server.js. And all right, node's running, and then oh, something went wrong and I need to go change something and restart it. Well, I don't want to have to type that out again, so just hit the arrow key up and you're good. Then you can hit enter and run that exact same command. Plus you have a history of everything you ran. So if you can't remember what you did or what action happened a few steps before, the arrow keys are a great way to step up and through that. We've talked about getting help from man. I suggest just playing around with that. There are tons and tons of commands that are out there. You can even man, and it'll give you a reference for itself. So a little bit recursive there. Oh, here's how to get information on the thing that talked about man pages. We've talked about clear. You can also see there was another one there too. Like, did I have Control I? That was weird. Control L. I don't know why I have that listed there. But the thing I want to get across with this is you guys, again, are very used to, you've worked with a lot of programs that have these graphic interfaces, windows and buttons and lists and tabs, all of that interaction. All of that is fundamentally built on top of the code underneath. And that code doesn't have to have a graphic interface for the vast majority of what it's trying to accomplish. So when I typed less server.js, less itself is an application, the same way that Google Chrome is an application running on your system. Less is an application. It just does one very specific thing. So if we looked at the man pages for it, it'll tell you it's the opposite of more. Useless, because they have a good sense of humor. So let's look at the man page for more. File perusal filter. So it helps you read files is all it does. These are just applications with a different interface than you're used to seeing. Present this because one of the first things you do when you're learning how to program is you almost always write these command line type programs, because a GUI is actually really complex to write. It's a complex interface. If you were to try and create one from scratch in any programming language, there's a lot that you have to learn about programming before you'd even be able to do that. But typing a program here at the console and having it output something just as some text to the console is much, much easier and quicker and doesn't require anywhere near as much work. So we can, right now, let's go ahead and create a very, very simple program in JavaScript, and we'll have it just output stuff to the console, so you guys will get a feel for what's going on there. So let's see. I'll do it this way. I should have them on here, but I don't know. All right. So we'll create something very, very simple. I don't know if this is the right way to write something out in Node. We'll find out. There we go. So that was an example of an actual program, the same way that Cloud9 is a program or anything else is. And if we go back in and look at that, this is a JavaScript program, very, very simple. All it has is 3 real lines of code with some space in between. But if we were to try and do that exact same program with a graphic user interface, there's a ton of extra code that would be required before we would even be able to show that information in that graphical user interface. So when you're first learning how to program, in order to focus on these fundamentals and not have to introduce every concept about programming all at once before you can see any output whatsoever, we tend to have people work on the command line and get output from the command line first. It's just a much, much easier environment to learn the basics of programming. I know it's not as responsive as you might be used to, or not as fancy or pretty, but it's a very powerful way to sort of learn the basics. And then you'll be able to look at these files as well inside of Cloud9. Let me make this smaller. This is just that exact same file. And Cloud9 gives you some nice nice tools when we're working in the files. We'll go into this a lot more in the next class, but when you're working with JavaScript files or a lot of different programming files, Cloud9's editor will give you a lot of tooling to make stuff easier. So if you're looking at it here, okay, well, these bars, those are a different color, as well as this console.log. What's going on here? Why is it using different colors to show things? I didn't put any special color information into that text file. Does anybody have a guess as to why it shows us different colors?
That's actually defining what you're doing on that one. It's the command or the syntax that you're talking about.
There you go. Good guess. Yeah, what it's doing is, this is known as syntax highlighting in editors, and it's a way for you to help understand the different parts of this program, the different parts of the language. So you could almost think of it as, you know, if this was English instead and we were writing something in English, why isn't it typing there. There we go. Interesting. I don't know why it's not letting me type. Maybe it will now. All right, what's going on here? See, I don't know what state I got into now because it's not letting me type stuff. There we go. Now it works. Right, so if we had like a sentence like the quick brown fox jumped or whatever, let's go with our classic grade school learning English sentence. You break this down into your different parts of the sentence. You've got your subject, like the fox, and you have your verb, like jumped, and those different aspects of it. That's what syntax highlighting is doing. That's what these different colors are inside of this editor, is it's just highlighting them in different ways so you know that this is saying something different, and this, well, it's not really highlighted with a specific color, so probably doesn't have special meaning by itself in this programming language. It only has meaning because we put it in there. Well, this is highlighted a specific way, so it might have a special meaning as well. You know, and you see the same thing here. All right, highlighting and some other highlighting. It's just, all that is a way to make it easier when you're coding to sort of recognize these different structural pieces of your programming language and understand how they're going together. And it's really, really useful, especially when you're first learning, because you'll quickly learn, like that bad example I gave earlier where I did something like var foo. Sort of a hint here that something's going wrong, even ignoring this. There's a hint that something's wrong because, wait a minute, these ones have var in this sort of purplish color and this one doesn't. So maybe something's wrong here. I need to do something different. Oh, there we go. Now it looks like it recognized it and it understands what's going on. So that syntax highlighting is just a really, really powerful tool when you're starting to learn to help you understand the different aspects and get a feel for, something's off here. I really expected that to look a certain way. All right. Let's do one more complex command here than some of these others. So here's my more complex command I'm going to run, or program I'm going to run from the console, just to show you that when you're running programs at the console, like a lot of the ones we've seen have been very, very simple, but you can also do something that's much more complex. So there are programs that do a lot of very powerful things in the terminal or console. You'll hear me use those words sort of interchangeably. And they can even sometimes do things more easily than you might be able to do the exact same thing from a graphical user interface. An example of that would be like this curl command. So let's check out the manual for it real fast. Curl transfer a URL. You may not be familiar with what a URL is. A URL is just pretty much any resource. It stands for Universal Resource Locator. It's any web address. And so I just captured the web address for one of the books that is hosted on a page up there. So if I did curl and that URL, and then let's give it a -o option and name it something, tables.txt. You'd see a whole bunch of stuff was going on in the middle of that. Not only did I add a new file over here, which we'll look at in just a moment, but this program was even outputting information while that file was being downloaded to your console and giving you a whole bunch of information there. And if we go look at the file, you can see we downloaded the House of Seven Gables by Hawthorne from this website. So that was a lot easier in many respects than like right-clicking on something and saying save as or whatever and choosing where to save it and work with it. It was very fast and simple for us to just use this curl command line program to download a file directly. And you could even do that with entire directories of files all at once with curl. So these console programs can be very, very powerful. Another really powerful one would be an example of, let's say, grep. And this isn't something you guys are gonna need to know about. I'm just showing you the example of there's a different interface to work with this stuff, and it can be really, really powerful. So if we grep, I'm gonna mess this up because I always get the syntax of grep wrong. Let's grep for the, yep, syntax wrong. Look, I'm stuck. I'm in that sort of state. Like, what's going on? All right, Control C got me out of it. So pattern file is the right syntax, it looks like. So grep the and gables.txt. So what grep did was it literally went through this whole book and found every instance of the string the or the word the in it and spit it out to the terminal for us. And we could choose, you know, a word that's less common. I saw happiness in there. I'm guessing it's a little less common. We can see every instance of it from the whole book spit out on the command line right there. So there are a lot of really, really powerful commands, really, really powerful tools that you can interact with at the terminal or command line. I don't have any real dedicated homework for the first class. You know, I'm trying to keep it loose at first, but we're gonna have homework in later classes. Yes?
About reference book, big enough JavaScript while we take the class.
Yeah, I'll be adding some references. I'm going to set up a GitHub page or project area for this, and then I'll get a link out to that, and there'll be a reference section for that, as well as sort of the notes of each one of these classes. So these notes that I was going over here, this lesson, all of that will be up there on that site, and I'll get that out within the next few days. I just haven't gotten all the little bits and pieces set up to have it there yet. And so every class will have that, as well as I'll be updating this README overview for each class saying, here's what the lesson covered and the material that we went over in that class. And also post links to the video in each one of them. Oh yeah, no specific homework for this one. The only thing I would say is spend some time playing around in the terminal or console. If you're nervous, like you're afraid you're gonna mess something up, do it in Cloud9 because you can just create another you can create another workspace if you break the whole thing. So don't do like destructive commands if you're not comfortable with them on your own system. RM, the one that removes stuff as an example, because it can delete files, and especially if you put certain flags on there, it won't even warn you about it and stuff will just get deleted. I did that once on my own system. When I was in school, I deleted my whole home directory and all the files in it by accident and had to go recreate everything. So there's some things you want to be careful about, but again, the benefits of something like Cloud9 is it's not your system, you're not going to break it. You can just create another workspace on the fly instantly if anything goes wrong. So just play around with it. Try and even learn some new commands. I'll post a reference with some of them, give each one of them a try, and try and get comfortable interacting with your computer through this command line or this terminal as opposed to always interacting with it through a graphic user interface. I think that's really everything that I have for this class. So are there any questions? Yes?
When you read the title of the cat, like, what is that?
What is that?
Yeah, like could you summarize what
Let me share my screen again real fast, just so that it's on here too. So what cat? It's a term you're probably not very familiar with outside of programming. It's used a lot in programming. It's short for concatenate, which basically just means taking two things and putting them together. So it means, you know, if you have a dog and cat, and you put them together, you get like dog cat or cat dog, if you're a fan of old like Nickelodeon shows. And all cat is doing when we run it on the console is it's saying, put everything that comes from whatever is input into this program and add it right to the console, whatever is on the console right now. So it's concatenating that to the console. I think it's been a while since I've done this. I don't know if this is going to work. We'll see. I think you can even specify multiple items. And what you'll see is it's printed out each one of them, just one after the other, because it's just concatenating them together onto the console here. And that's all we did when we read an individual file with it. It's just writing it out to that, to your terminal directly. Does that make sense?
So the curl thing, the -O,
Yeah.
was that naming the file that you wanted to put it in?
Yeah, that was telling it what I wanted the file name to be. And I could have done that differently. So for example, I think this will work. Oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, too confusing. So let's see here. All right. Remember, I did this arrow before with the echo, right? There's other ways you can do things. So I could do this little arrow instead, and then it also has that file in it. Because what it did was it read all the content and got everything that curl read and put it. It's a lot like the concatenate, except it's saying put it into this location. And that location was just the file name. And then if I wanted to delete that, I can just delete my second copy of the file. Any other questions? All right. So no other questions, then go ahead and